Hi there. I'm Claudia Hosky from Fed Insider, and on behalf of the George Washington University Center for Excellence in Public Leadership and ServiceNow, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Strategies for Retaining the Next Gen Workforce. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod. If we don't get to them during today's webinar, we'll share them with our speakers so they can follow up. Also, take note of the Resources tab on the left side of your screen to download today's slides and additional reading on today's topic. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along, use the hyperlink under the Live Captioning or CART tab above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available in the next day or two. And to earn training credit, you'll need to answer all polling questions throughout. And now, let me turn over the reins to today's moderator, Kevin Brooks from ServiceNow, to begin today's discussion.
Thank you, Claudia. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kevin Brooks, and I will be moderating what I know will be a lively and interesting discussion about a very timely topic, recruiting and retaining federal employees with an emphasis on generations X and Z. The need to bring in new talent while simultaneously retaining the right skill mix of existing talent is not a new phenomenon. Federal leaders have been wrestling with this challenge for the past few years, and it's fair to say the shocks to the system over the last 2 years have added to the criticality. While Gen X tends to focus on family and Gen Z prioritizes improving the world as a whole, agencies are faced to keep both in mind as they create a strong public sector workforce. Today, we have federal executives and industry thought leaders discussing the differences and similarities between these two generations and the strategies to keep them engaged and satisfied at work. It's a fascinating time for federal leaders and change agents. We have a diverse panel of 4 highly qualified guests with us today to talk about some of these opportunities. So, first, I would like to welcome Ms. Jacqueline Clay, Deputy Chico, Department of Education. Next, Mr. Eric Dilworth, Deputy Chico from Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Also joining us today is Mr. Paul Peach, Senior Manager, Research and Analysis, Partnership for Public Service. And finally, Mr. Joe Abbott. Finally, Mr. Joe Abbott, Chico for Food Safety Inspection Service for the USDA. Thank you all for being here. We have a lot of interesting items to discuss regarding the future of work, roles, hybrid workforce, roles and hybrid workplaces that will play a role in attracting and retaining employees, job satisfaction, and improving productivity and culture. We have some amazing talented guests with us today, so I want to take a moment to learn a little about each of them. So Jacqueline, let's start with you. Tell us a little about your role at the Department of Education and your background.
Absolutely, and thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So I do have the pleasure of serving as the Deputy Chico for Department of Education. I have over 32 years of federal service, all of which I've spent in human resources. And just for reference, I've served in every area of human resources that you can possibly think of, and I did that purposely so that I can learn and continue to grow in this area. As the Deputy Chico, and in partnership with the Chico, I have responsibility in supporting ED's mission. And supporting ED's mission, it is to promote student achievement, and we foster equal access and also educational excellence. In my responsibilities for human capital, I am responsible for the human capital framework and strategy. I am assisting with all areas from competency management, ensuring employees have a path for career progression, which is very key to the current environment that we're in, develop strategies to retain, recruit, and talent into the organization. I also have responsibility, and one of my primary focuses is to look at HR operations to ensure that we continue to be efficient, seamless, and continuously improve in how we deliver service to our customers. And lastly, with that, I always have a customer experience mindset. And in having a customer experience mindset, I always want to improve the customer experience, and that's internal to the Department of Education, but also I'm always mindful of improving the applicant experience and just continuously working with employees where my passion lies. Thanks again for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Eric, I'll ask the same question to you. Tell us a little about your role and about yourself, please.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As you stated, I'm the Deputy Chico here at NRC. We have a unique mission as far as regulating the nuclear plants and those things throughout the country. So our work from the human resource side is really about doing everything to support that mission. And in my role as Deputy Chico, really see it as collaborating with the other leaders throughout the agency to promote and execute our HR programs. And then another major part of that is actually recruiting and developing our HR workforce. And that's key in these times to try to find the right skill sets so that we can perform our mission and services. Prior to coming to NRC, I was with USDA. And then prior to that, for 29 years, I was an Air Force civilian and moved all around the world working for the Air Force in the Pentagon, Germany, Italy, Japan. A lot of great opportunities. And now I'm here in D.C. for the last 4 years and really enjoying the mission here at NRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, could you tell us a little bit about the partnership and your role there?
Sure thing, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Paul Peach, a Senior Manager of Research at the Partnership for Public Service. The partnership is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering a more effective federal government. And we do that through 3 streams of work. One is leadership and professional development training for federal employees. 2, advocacy, including legislative advocacy on Capitol Hill. And 3, research, which supports the first 2 streams, but is also available for free on our website for all federal leaders, the media, academic students, and anyone interested in good government. So at the partnership, I head up our federal research work portfolio, studying things like recruiting, hiring, and professional development. And currently, we're finishing up some research that we did in collaboration with Kevin Brooks and ServiceNow, which is focused on Gen X and Gen Z civil servants and strategies for retaining them in government.
Awesome, that's great, and it was wonderful working with you on that, Paul. I'm looking forward to the release of that research paper. Hey, finally, Mr. Joe Abbott, who is the Chico for Food and Safety Inspection Service at USDA. Joe, you want to talk a little about yourself and your organization?
Sure, and thanks for inviting me to participate today. And I don't want to sound repetitive to my colleagues that have already talked about it. So at FSIS, I provide care and feeding, if you will, of over 9,000 employees across the country that inspect meat, poultry, and egg products so that when you go to the store, you're confident that what you're getting is wholesome and it's okay to eat. And that's really important. We work with the industry to make sure that they're compliant. And we face the same challenges for recruiting, regardless of which generational letter you want to use, that everybody else faces, which is lower unemployment and job availability rates, so we know that the candidates are being really selective about where they want to pursue their next career move. And we know it's changing constantly, so in that regard, we want to become the employer of choice. We want to make sure that it's the right fit with the organization and that they share the same passion that we have for keeping the public food supply safe. Back to you.
Thank you for that, Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you all for your backgrounds and history. I'm sure our audience appreciates knowing all about the work you do, and it provides them with a good foundation for questions and feedback. So I want to begin by diving into some specific challenges that federal agencies are dealing with regards to culture and the future of work. So let's start with Jacqueline. Jacqueline, how important to the mission of government is retaining the younger workforce?
Thank you, Kevin. This question is really important and critical. I can't emphasize enough how critical it is for government right now and in the future to retain and recruit the younger workforce. I believe we're at a place where we need to ensure we're bringing in a successor generation that's prepared to move us forward, to move the government forward with innovation, the ability to challenge the standard processes, the ability to seek change, moving us away from some of the antiquated processes and technology that we have now. So for me, just to retain the younger generation, we need to ensure that we have forward thinking approaches. I also just want to mention that when we bring in a successor generation, they can currently work hand in hand now with the current generations that are on board and learning some of the program areas, which is a part of succession planning. I'll be very frank with you. It absolutely pains me that we don't do enough of this. Ideally, we would work in a government that would pair up the generations so that we're help us move forward. There's value in working with opposite of someone who sees the world differently. The pairing, if you will, helps the retention because Gen X is giving back and Gen Z will feel more connected to the mission and its employees. And by no means am I suggesting that Gen X is not innovative or forward thinking, but we, to include me, could benefit from the challenge. I, for one, would love to give back and work with Gen Z to partner, train, develop their skill set and prepare them to take on this new task. Lastly, again, and I've said this before, it's a part of our workforce planning efforts, and I'm hoping that all of our federal agencies are moving towards more retention and recruitment of the younger generation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll switch a little bit. So, Eric, your agency has a really unique mission set with a different type of workforce. So, are there unique circumstances you might add to what Jacqueline just said?
Yeah, I think with our scientists and engineer focus on some of our critical skill sets, we have to. One of the things that we have to do is promote our mission and all the good things about what we do, all the unique work that goes on inside the agency. So we're starting to do that and doing that up front in the recruitment phase and then also in the development phase of people being on board. So something that I see here that we do more than I've seen in any other agency is that we do a lot of rotational assignments where folks can they've been on board for whatever amount of time, but they can go work in different organizations, maybe a job with different skill sets, where not only they develop, but they also bring something different to that office that they're working in. And that really, I've seen it since I've been here. I've only been here 14 months, but I've seen how that really employees find that a real value. They're getting to do something outside of maybe their normal career field. So that's a great retention tool that we're using. It makes folks want to stay with the organization because they know they can get different opportunities and learn different things, and it's going to help them develop, help them get promoted, all the things they're trying to do. So if by providing those opportunities, that's really helping with the middle career folks. And then when you see the newer workers come on board, and then they see these opportunities, they know they need to get really good in their current position, but then they know they'll be able to cross-train and do these type of things. It really is one of the unique things we're doing here to retain our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Good points there. So, Paul, you heard Jacqueline and Eric talk a little bit. Do both of their things they're doing and seeing track what you're seeing across government?
Yes, absolutely. I want to echo what Jacqueline said. Recruiting and retaining younger federal employees is just critical to the federal workforce. They are the future of government. And a few data points to keep in mind. Recently, I think it was back in February, EEOC put out a report which noted that 72% of the federal workforce is over the age 40, whereas only 54% of private sector workers are over age 40. So that really underscores what we all know, which is the federal workforce is older relative to the private sector. Another data point to consider, and this is based on our analysis of FedScope data, Gen Z currently only makes up 1.6% of the federal workforce. Now, that might seem logical given that Gen Z is just coming into the workforce. The oldest Gen Zer today is 25 years old. But consider that Gen Z is currently 9.1% of the overall U.S. labor force. So there is an imbalance there. This really underscores that the federal government needs to do a better job getting younger people into government, getting them excited about public service, and providing them the resources, the motivation, and support to keep them in government. Especially when we consider that within the next 2 years or so, 30% of the federal workforce hits retirement age. So that retirement tsunami we've been talking about for a while is going to be coming. And finally, I just want to note that there's an opportunity here. Gen Z, although it's still defining itself, has already established a reputation for being socially conscious and committed to giving back. Basically, it's demonstrated the ingredients of public service. And I think mission public service is really a selling point to get younger people into government, and if that can be leveraged to keep them in government.
Those are excellent points. I'm glad that's kind of a coalescence around what our two first speakers said. So thank you for that. So Joe, we're going to switch back to you now and change up a little bit. Are there different work expectations for Gen X and Gen Z, and what strategies can agencies employ to adapt to different needs?
So, Kevin, that's an excellent question, and I hope you can hear me better now. Just let me know if you can't. Paul brought up interesting statistics on the Gen X and Gen Z, and I look at that question in two ways. So work expectations from the agency standpoint, I think the work still needs to be done in a manner that, for us in FSIS, ensures that the food is still safe. So we have the particular dilemma of 90% of our workforce are in what you would call a fixed facility, an establishment or a laboratory, and the other 10% would have more what you would call the flexible possibility for remote alternative work arrangements. So that's one of the restrictions or the constraints that we have to deal with. We've got the same values in that we know that Gen X and the Gen Zers, they place a high importance both on financial stability and also the career stability, opportunity to pursue something meaningful in their futures. And the public service aspect and public health, we think, is critical and important enough that it would be attractive to the Gen Z group, and also because of the benefits that we offer, the Gen Xers seeing that sort of able to operate independently, but still be able to contribute and sustain the level of employment is critical to their future success. And another thing is that we do offer significant incentives to our new workforce, whether it's a recruitment incentive, we have retention incentives, student loan repayment. In addition to the public student loan forgiveness program, we have our own in FSIS. We have a new employee referral program, so we kind of recognize folks who are trying to attract folks like them in their communities. And we have town hall meetings, open microphone town hall meetings. You talk directly to the administrator, ask questions in a safe environment for that interaction, for that human element, because we know post-COVID, everybody feels a little dehumanized when we don't see each other very often in the workplace, even though 90% of our workforce does see each other on a regular basis because they have to, it's kind of the job. We have the flexible work schedules. We have special pay setting for hard-to-fill locations. And we have another strategy we're using is for continuing education. So employees that want to pursue advanced learning, it doesn't necessarily have to be a degree program. They want to learn a new skill, a new trait for their career. Maybe it's they're in the food science and they want to learn about the finance or program management, and we allow them the opportunity to go and do that. So those are some of the strategies that we're doing to adapt to the newer workforce. And don't tell anybody, but in FSIS, we got 25% of our workforce that are baby boomers. So that matches up perfectly with what Paul was talking about in terms of the demographics. And believe it or not, we still have a handful of traditionals that are working for us that were born around 1940. So that's an element of enlightenment and learning that we got to figure out how to pass that on down through the workforce to get to those Gen Zers to carry that forward. Hand the microphone back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Joe. So Jacqueline, I'm going to kind of ask you to follow up on what Joe just talked about, particularly if you have any information around his last point about traditionalists and a 5-generation workforce. And so are you guys at DOE doing similar things that Joe's organization is doing, and are you seeing similar trends?
Thank you, Kevin. Absolutely. We're seeing similar trends. Our data is a little bit different than what Joe mentioned. Yes, we do have several generations represented at Department of Education, but in that, our largest one that's represented right now is, in fact, Gen X. And our numbers are lower on Gen Z, numbers are lower on our millennials, numbers are lower on our baby boomers. But with that, another data point that I want to mention about the Department of Education is that we are almost 55% or so a remote workforce environment. So, I don't want to say that there are different work expectations at Department of Education because I don't, based on my observation, I don't see that, but I do recognize and observe that there are definitely differences in the way that people operate at Department of Education based on those generational differences. So some of the things that we have observed is that we do see that the Gen Z generation typically want to stay connected to the organization. They want to stay connected to their colleagues, the employees. They want to feel like they are a part of the overall environment. So when we moved on COVID to this more remote work environment, I think the impact was very consequential to them. And whereas the Gen X, because, and I think it was Joe that mentioned this, or maybe it was Paul, where they are more, they were more focused on family, a lot of them enjoy the remote work environment and being able to build those family relationships and still feeling like they're giving back to the public service. So we've done a couple of things at Department of Education to try to help that, similarly to what Joe has done at USDA, which is really bringing in more mentorship type programs, using incentives to retain our Gen Z workforce. We also have developed intern cohorts, if you will, and we're also looking at how we can do more training and development on working in a hybrid work environment, specifically working with some of our supervisors and managers so that they can understand how they continue to reach those generations and make sure that they do feel like they are a part of the organization, because you do want that empathetic leader. And where some of us may not need that on a day-to-day basis, I recognize that some of the Gen Z definitely need that empathetic leader, and they need to feel like they are part of the community. So we've definitely explored that, and we built in some strategies to help our employees feel connected to Department of Education.
Great, thank you very much for that. Paul, can you add anything? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Paul, can you add anything to that? Yeah, so please.
Absolutely. I want to note that Jacqueline's findings, what she was just sharing from the Department of Education, we were hearing similar things from other agencies through our research. And what Joe was talking about, what USDA is doing in terms of trying to encourage Gen Zers to stay, those are some of the strategies that we actually highlight in the report, and I might talk about in a little while. But some other thoughts on different work expectations for Gen X and Gen Z. I want to touch a little more on flexible work. And just to note that Gen Z, right, in 2022, the oldest Gen Z person is 25 years old, and that means that a lot of Gen Z civil servants have only experienced remote work and hybrid work. Many Gen Zers came into the workforce during the pandemic. So, the notion of being in the office 5 days a week is somewhat foreign for some people, younger people. And as a result, although we did hear that some Gen Z do want to be in the office, like Jacqueline said, so they can connect with their colleagues and feel that they belong, many also expect flexible work. That's their only experience, and now it's an expectation that they have, that is the normal work environment. Additionally, we heard from some younger people that they see flexible work options as an indication of trust, that their leaders trust and value them. Two other quick things to note. Regarding mission, Gen X, Gen Z civil servants, like all civil servants, tend to be connected to mission, that they support mission. They're public servants. That's why they're in government. But I will note that, again, Gen Z is very socially conscious. However, a lot of Gen Z people we talked about noted that they don't see government service as the only way that they contribute to the public good. And also, they really want a workplace and work responsibilities that align with their personal values. So as a result, younger people may be more willing to change jobs within the federal government, or even to leave federal government altogether if they can find a job that they think better meets their goals and connects them closer to mission and reflects their personal values a little more. And then finally, I just want to note that in terms of growth, Gen Z, a difference with Gen Z is they are particularly keen to grow, and they are looking for guidance, tailored guidance, like mentoring. We talked about that already a little bit. And they're looking for supervisors, mentors, and other leaders to help them plan a federal career, help them understand career arcs. They want to hear about the career stories from their leaders, and they want to know how they can plot a federal career. So they're looking for that additional support and bespoke support when it's available.
Those are very fascinating topics, some data points, and I want to pull on a thread a little bit that kind of leads from that. You talked about the expectation of remote work and hybrid work for multiple generations, but can you talk about technology and the use of technology and the expectation within Gen Z of an elevated employee experience, seeing as how they have a very robust personal experience when it comes to technology? What are they looking for as far as the work is concerned?
Absolutely, and that is the case, robust. That's a great word. So Gen Z, this is the first generation to completely grow up with digital technology integrated into their lives. And so as a result, it is second nature to them, and younger people expect well-integrated, high-functioning technology in all aspects of their life, including at work. So at work, they want technology that is, that facilitates reliably communication, collaboration, and sense of belonging. And of course, they want technology that is stable, doesn't have lots of bugs, and that stays up to date with the cutting edge. And so while both the Gen X and Gen Z civil servants we spoke with in our study talked about frustrations with outdated tech infrastructure in government and sometimes a culture that's slow to adapt to new technology, Gen Xers tend to talk about that as the cost of doing business. It's a headache, but they're public servants and they keep at it because they're mission focused, and that's what they do. Gen Z, more often Gen Zers would talk about technology as a retention issue, that if they could not work in an environment that provide them the resources, the tools to enable them to work effectively, that they might look elsewhere. Again, Gen Z don't see public service as the only way to give back to the world. And if they feel they can do the important work, meet their mission in the private sector, and have the resources they need to do it, they may start looking there. And I just want to note one other thing. Because Gen Z is so tech fluent, one recommendation we made as a retention strategy, but also as a way to leverage their skill set, is to set up reverse mentoring programs in which younger people are sharing their knowledge and skills, their technical fluency, with older generations, Gen Xers, baby boomers, and even older millennials, to help them catch up to speed on using, let's say, Microsoft Teams or Slack. And maybe it could be as simple as the terminology and syntax of chat messaging. And this could be a good way to not only share their knowledge, but also to give them a sense of agency, which of course can lead to retention. But finally, we have to be careful that a reverse mentoring program is organized respectfully and productively, so no one is put out by having a much younger person who they may not feel is appropriate to give them a mentoring relationship. Back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Paul. So that's a very good peek under the hood. Some of the things that we're seeing across government. So let's kind of narrow in again. Eric, so at NRC, are there any specifics that you can offer regarding how you're using technology to perhaps move the needle forward?
Nothing specific, but one of the things that we did at NRC, and prior to me coming on board, they made a decision prior to COVID to issue out laptops to everyone. So once the pandemic hit, they were used to that, using the laptops, having the connectivity from homes. So honestly, I have not had, I think I had one day in the last year that I had a problem connecting at home or any kind of issue. So all those kinks that were worked out, it allows our new workforce to come on board, and it's pretty seamless. Now, one thing that we have found is that, ensuring that they have all the other things that go with onboarding, that those things are provided immediately. So it's not just the technology, it's making sure everyone has the right access. And that's something that we've been working on, and I know other agencies have a challenge with that. And especially when we have 6 different locations where our employees are spread out across the United States. So the challenge is to make sure we have the right processes in place to ensure that new employees, no matter where they are coming on board, they get the same access in the same amount of time, which should be, the day they walk in the door is what the goal is. So that's more of our challenge, is the process side, not the available technology.
Well, I think that's part of technology. I think making sure that you can actually do your job on day one is absolutely important. So that is a great add, a great value add, in my opinion. So Joe, are you seeing the same things at food and safety, and not just technology or hybrid work, but just a combination of how people are coming on board or engaging technology-wise or hybrid work-wise?
Short answer is yes, but I think we looked at it maybe a slight turn of that same kaleidoscope. So we believe that we've got a value proposition for candidates coming from either Gen X, Gen Y, or Gen Z. And in that value proposition, which is focused on food safety, we, I think, needed to learn how to talk their language, right? So like Paul was saying earlier, they have their own vernacular, they have instant messages, they have texting instead of speaking. And we know also in our HR environment that the language that we use for getting into the Fed is USA Jobs, right? That's the platform that has been chosen. And in doing that, we kind of have to reverse the reverse mentoring. So approach we took was that we send out leadership, even all the way up to the administrator, into work unit meetings in the plant to talk to employees about getting folks to join the agency. And we listen. And we listen to how they describe it, especially the newer employees and what their experience was, and then try and translate that into opportunities for sessions. We did tutorials on how to apply to USA Jobs, hands-on, at the workplace, in the hopes of getting them to talk our language, even if it's just for a few minutes, to process the dare I say, difficult USA Jobs application, because that hasn't changed. Regardless of how tech savvy we think we are, they still have to go through all those wickets. The other thing we learned is that the younger generations do expect immediate response. It's almost instantaneous because of the technology, and so we have to learn how to teach them to embrace some of that human inject into their work life, whether that's a face-to-face meeting with a supervisor about performance instead of a chat message that says, LOL, you did a good job, right? So we have that career development through our Office of Education and Employee Development, that entity. And then on social media, we had to do a whole rebranding of our agency and its mission, because all the old nomenclature and visuals that we used, it really wasn't resonating with them. So those are a couple of things that we did specific for FSIS, knowing 90% of our workforce doesn't get to take full advantage of all the possible flexibilities in the Fed.
Great. Okay, that's very good. Very good add to that. So we're going to move on to a little bit of a more programmatic kind of stuff here, shaping the workforce. So Jacqueline, can you list a few programs or incentives that your agency is using to target mid-career and younger and tenure employees?
Yes, Kevin, absolutely. And I will start with incentives. The Department of Education uses a wide variety of incentives to target both mid-career and our younger tenure employees. Specifically, we offer student loan repayment incentives. We do retention and recruitment incentives, as well as superior qualification type incentives for those employees with unique skill sets. One that I see this used a lot with is information technology. I can imagine that your scientists and some of your other specialty positive education fields will use that superior qualification as well. For some of our programs that we've developed at the Department of Education, we have a Pathways to Leadership program that we developed, and it is specifically for grades 11 to 13. With that particular program, it is 1 year in length. It is a competitive program. We have 20 slots that we offer to our employees. And the goal is to really strengthen and align these employees with other senior leaders within the organization and help develop succession planning and get them to understand how to operate as a leader in the Department of Education while supporting the mission. The other program that we have at Department of Education is development through mentorship. This program is we have it's for GS7 and above, so that's really our entry level individuals that come in, and the mentors for this program have to be a GS13 and above, and they have an opportunity to help the agency develop its workforce by working with the GS7 and above. In this particular program, again, the mentorship program, it lasts a little over a year. We allow the employees to work on specific projects with the mentors. They get regular and recurring feedback with the mentors. They get to rotate to some of the other organizations to work on special projects, and they get professional mentorship from typically what we find in this particular program is executive leadership. And the other thing that we did with this program is we develop mentoring moments. In mentoring moments, we have executives that come in on a monthly basis. They speak to, it doesn't matter what grade you are in Department of Education, you can come and participate in that. But it's a virtual event that we put on for all employees, and we talk about different leadership activities. Sometimes we focus on executive full qualifications. We may focus on hybrid work environment. But again, it's an opportunity for others to listen in and gain some mentorship from some of our most seasoned leaders at Department of Education. There is one program that we're working on now that we've developed in our 2-year plan, our 2-year goal to continue to enhance our human capital, which is to develop a entry-level cohort program that is centralized. And the reason why we want to develop a centralized entry-level cohort program is so that we can make sure that everyone is coming in together at the same time, receiving the same opportunity to rotate to the various, we call them principal office components within ED. They will be assigned a mentor. They have one supervisor. They have regular recurring meetings with one another. And a lot of that activity is done virtually, but that's something that we're looking at to develop as we continue to enhance our mentoring efforts here at Department of Ed. Thank you.
Pretty robust. Okay, no problem. That's a pretty robust set of programs there. I'm really intrigued to learn more about those, and we'll dive in deeper with you later on this one. But Eric, I'm going to switch gears, not switch gears, but continue along some of the things that Jacqueline laid out. But again, going back to the fact that you have a highly technical workforce, are there any programs or incentives that you all are using?
Right. Thanks, Kevin. No, I think one of the things we've done to recruit and retain is using retention incentives more. That has moved up quite a bit in the last year, especially with the workforce that we have, highly sought after workforce. So we've been much more flexible with offering retention bonuses to our current staff. And also in the recruitment piece, one of the things we found out is that, I'm sure everyone on here know that with it being really competitive to recruit, workforce flexibilities is the real key, whether it's full-time, remote, or very flexible telework schedule. So, and we're currently relooking at telework policy right now. We were 4 days of pay period, so we're looking to go less than that. But even with the 4 days pay period, actually talking to the candidates and explaining all the flexibilities within that. And one of the things, we have a really flexible work schedule. We explain it where, if you have a situation where you need to get online in the morning, but then you need to break to see your child off to school, you could break, come back. If you need to go, at the late in the afternoon, pick up your child, you can break and come back and finish your workday. It's just having those conversations with new or recruiting folks really made a difference. In fact, one of our leaders brought to me last week about a situation with their daughter being recruited by a private sector company, and where the company, and we're thinking about how we could do this, where when they recruit a person, they give them an offer, but then they have a current, say another junior employee, have conversations with them about the organization, and let them talk to different people before they even make a decision on joining. So when they do join, they're very confident in the decision they made to join your organization. So we're looking at that. And then also, which I think Jacqueline mentioned, really identifying all the opportunities for advancement and moving around, and those type of things to prospective employees or your junior employees that come on board. You really have to give them the big picture, because they in many cases they're not patient. They want to see the big picture so they can determine how long they're going to stay with you or how soon they're going to leave. So, and then having that mindset that uh, you're hiring people to get to get them experience so they can help you complete your mission, but also that they may leave at some point. So you got to have, and that's not, and don't look at that as a negative thing. So providing all the opportunities, making sure they understand all the flexibilities, all the benefits, all of those things up front is key to us retaining people down the line. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Paul, are there other programs or incentives that you're seeing across the federal space that could fill kind of the gap between what Paul or what Eric and Jacqueline just alluded to?
Yeah, absolutely. All of the ideas that Jacqueline and Eric mentioned, I completely agree with. And I want to touch on two things then that Joe and Eric mentioned earlier in this conversation. One is a particular type of financial incentive, and that is a student loan forgiveness program. Gen Z is particularly concerned about financial stability, and the average Gen Zer has or had in 2021 $18,000 in student loan debt, which unfortunately is not that high relative to millennials, even some Gen Xers, but still is a lot of money. The difference is that Gen Zers have grown up, throughout. They came, they were cognizant. They were young, but cognizant of the 2008 Great Recession, and they're coming to age in the day as we've been going through the COVID-19 crisis and market fluctuations, and now we have rising home prices and inflation, and there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about money. So in any event, they're particularly concerned about their financial stability. And so from what we heard from younger federal employees is that the public service loan forgiveness program and the federal student loan repayment program are two great existing federal programs that agencies can leverage to provide some financial relief, and that helps keep them in government. I will note the difference, of course, being the public service loan forgiveness program is a program that's available to all federal employees as well as employees of state governments, local governments, and some nonprofit organizations, and through the program, the federal government forgives direct loans for people who've worked for 10 years in these positions, whereas the federal student loan repayment program is a program that enables agencies to set up their own student loan repayment program of up to $10,000 per employee per year for a total of $60,000 per employee. And what we also learned is that a lot of civil servants don't know about these programs. So a recommendation is just to make younger people aware of them. But that's not enough. They also need to know how to apply. They need to be supported in that way. In 2021, for example, about a third of applications for the public service loan forgiveness program were incomplete. They were begun but incomplete, and that's indication that for whatever reason, people weren't able to complete those applications. So people need support, that technical support, to know how to complete the process. I also want to touch on what Eric mentioned. He was talking about the NRC's rotation program, and for both Gen X and Gen Z, rotations, details, and public-private exchange programs can be a great way to engage people, to provide them an opportunity they wouldn't otherwise get, to let them develop professionally through that new work environment, and to get them back after that they're done. We've already talked about today a few intra-agency rotational programs, but of course there are inter-agency rotations and details that should be considered as examples. And finally, I just want to mention that in addition to the IPA mobility program, which enables federal employees to work temporarily in nonprofits, academia, and state and local government, there are a few public-private talent exchange programs which enable federal employees to work in the private sector for a short amount of time. DOD, DHS, Office of Director of National Intelligence, and the VA currently have a program. And the partnership actually put out a report last year, which is available for free on our website, that goes into details on these programs, which I think provide good examples of what could be done. And this report also connects to the various hiring authorities that can be leveraged to create such programs. The report's called, I believe, Trading Places, the Benefits, Challenges, and Potential of Federal Public-Private Exchanges. And back to you, Kevin.
Oh, great. Thanks, Paul. That was a lot of good information for us. Okay, folks, so we've been very broad and general in this conversation, but I do want to get a little bit more specific for a little bit. And I want to go to Eric first, but I want to talk about, are there any areas or career fields that bear particular attention with regards to generational recruiting and retention?
For us, it's just the scientist and engineer career field. And our focus is on that is to always be bringing in, finding that right sweet spot of how many new people do we need to bring in, for succession planning, but also ensuring that we're, bringing people in with the new learning, the newest, able to use the newest technology and have the newest education or most recent education. And of course, we provide continuous education. But the part of that that's difficult is the competitiveness to reach that top talent. So what we did it started 3 years ago. We're on our second cohort that just started. And it seems like not a big number, but it really makes a difference. We bring in a cohort of 25 employees, and I think someone else mentioned this. We centralize them. They're engineers and scientists, but we bring them in under Ochiko, and we actually brought over a program manager that she was a resident inspector nuclear out there in the field. We brought her over to Ochiko, and she manages these 25 folks, and we provide them rotational. We do it here in Rockville, Maryland, in the D.C. area. That's where our headquarters is. But they come in. We hire them from all over the country, from some of the big, best universities, and also diverse universities. And then over a year and a half period, we send them out to different locations to work, 3 months at a time, and get that training as they go through. And then there's other, training, on-the-job training. Then, of course, a lot of classroom training too. So they're getting that intense experience up front. But that's one of our big, ways that we're able to get those top students coming out of college, because they see this program and they see the benefit of it. And of course, they're getting promoted every year. We bring them at 9, and we outplace them at the 13 level. So, and we bring them in based on their experience, because some of these folks have some experience, and then they have the education too, recent college graduates. So we may bring them in at the 11, and those folks can be outplaced at the 13. Then others are outplaced at the 12, but they still have a target to the 13. So that's been really beneficial, that they know they will get the training. Also, we do the loan repayment. So all of those things really make a difference in getting that top talent.
Great, thank you. Joe, you also have a agency that relies on STEM talent. So anything different than what Eric's doing?
So again, slightly different turn of that kaleidoscope. So we do have the hard sciences that we need in the labs, microbiologists, chemists, lab technicians, science techs. Our biggest challenge is the same issue with the aging workforce. We run about 325 to 400 retirements a year, and most of our folks retire at eligibility plus 4 years. So we kind of get a known ahead of time buffer and try and fill behind them in hopes of that knowledge transfer. As far as occupations go, the veterinarian occupation is really our biggest challenge. We're the largest employer of veterinarians in the United States. There's only 28 schools in the country. But along with that presence in the schools, because they know about us, we have the Malak Scholars.
program, which gives them $15,000 a year tuition assistance while they're going to school. They work for us either during breaks or during the summer towards that doctorate of veterinary medicine. We got a $5,000 a year for the first 4-year recruitment incentive, so they get $20K over 4 years. We pay for their first move if it isn't where they're at right now. Maybe we need them in the Midwest and they'll be willing to go, so we can pay for the move. Along with what I talked earlier about this student loan repayment program. And on top of that, the last big chunk are the hard-to-fill food inspector positions, consumer safety inspectors. They're the ones who are literally hands-on in the plants trying to make sure the food is safe. It's really critical to the public health that they're there. And so we use a $5,000 recruitment incentive for new inspectors coming in. And we're hoping that at least influences some of the decision making while we provide the tutorials to get them to apply through the rigorous OPM USA jobs process. We use the Pathways program for students, one, to pique curiosity and also to help see if it's a right fit. Does our mission, does our value proposition resonate with them that they want to pursue a career in food safety? I think it is important enough. Public health is dependent upon it. And then in doing so, we can get those students and eventually recent grads into the agency and convince others like them through the referral program to join them, creating that community of food safety. Back to you.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to give Jacqueline 1 minute to wrap up with anything she hasn't said, and then I'll give Paul a minute. And I think it'll take us to the end of our talk. So Jacqueline, anything that you want to add that we haven't talked about already?
No, I think that both Joe and Eric kind of summed it up. I'll just say for Department of Education, it should be no surprise that our primary focus is on educators. We want to bring in educators, but we also have a need for data scientists because this is a educational research organization as well, and we do a lot of grants, so those are the type of fields that we look for in Department of Education, as well as our attorneys, which is really high because, again, we want to make sure that there's equality and access to education globally. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Paul, any final comments?
Sure, and I just want to note that Gen Z is just coming of age, and I suspect Gen Z will change, and that means retention strategies for Gen Z could change. So going forward, I think an overall recommendation, if agencies want to develop retention strategies targeted to generational cohorts, it's important to continue to do the research, to not only look at FEBS data, but perhaps do focus groups, spot surveys, and talk to younger employees and continue to find out what matters to them, what they're looking for in a work environment, and what will help them remain with the agency in supporting your mission.
Great, thank you, Paul. It's a good way to close us out. So I want to thank all our panel members today for engaging with us in fascinating and wide-ranging conversations. I love it when we have our books discussion. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure our audience did as well. A reminder that your questions will be answered offline. There were just a lot of really good questions. We just couldn't get to them all today. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Fed Insider's Claudia Hosky for some final thoughts for our audience.
Thank you. And for our audience, thank you all so much for your participation today. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends. And remember to log back in the next day or two to download a copy of our captioning transcript. We have many webinars in the works, so be sure to visit fedinsider.com to see what's coming up and to register for multiple webinars at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is Fed Insider signing off.